Hello and welcome back to some more The Great Dark Beyond star ratings. Today we have Lul Priest, we have Rogue, and we have Shaman to go over. Let's start with Lul Priest, and I'm just going to put all the cards up on the board. Normally I separate these into packages and where I think they're going to go, but what is this Priest package is all I'm going to say. Now, okay, let's digest this in two parts. There are 4 cards that lean towards this holy package. They are K'Ur, which, by the way, I don't think that's how you meant to pronounce it. I think it's meant to be like K'Ur or something like that, but whatever, I'm calling it K'Ur. K'Ur, Divine Star, Orbital Halo, and Lightspeed. They reward you for playing some sort of minion-based deck and casting a bunch of holy spells to get K'Ur's effect to go off multiple times and fill your board with minions that you can then proceed to buff. Problem, there is really no other package in Hearthstone right now that rewards you for casting holy spells. Now, there was one, but not again specifically for holy spells, but Overheal Priests, most of the heal spells were holy cards. Unfortunately, that archetype has been gutted, so yeah, that's going to be a bit of an unlucky moment for any Priest enjoyers. Then we have this Overzealous Healer, Anchorite, Ascara, Shield of Ascara, Draenei Priest package, which is really weird because one of the cards in particular, Anchorite, clearly is meant for an overheal deck. And I think the intention was that you would play, rather than doing the Injured Holer strategy, which obviously is garbage now since they nerfed its effect by half, the idea is that you'd put Heartthrob in the deck instead, and you would try and do the overheal thing with Anchorite and Heartthrob, and you would just generate this wide board of minions that would continuously get more and more health and be harder and harder to kill. And then you could do something like a Crazed Alchemist to flip the health over to attack, and you could smoke someone with a big minion. But it is so many moving parts that it's just not realistic for it to happen in a tempo-orientated manner, and I think this has to be some sort of tempo deck, so I just don't see that working. Then, Overzealous Healer, as much as I'd like to say this is an aggro card, and I think the intention is to use it as an aggro card, it also could see some play as a control card as well, since restoring 6 health to your opponent's hero isn't a problem for a control deck, sorry, because health totals don't matter too much until they do. I know that's kind of a funny way of saying this, but you want to get into the late game, you don't really care if your opponent has a lot of health, and indeed in the early game as a control deck you're probably not pushing face damage. That's kind of the easiest way to explain it. But you don't really want to Ascara your Overzealous Healer, right? So okay, what is the other Draenei for the package? It's Shield of Ascara, which is clearly what you're meant to Ascara, or like that was the intention, hence the name. But do you want to copy a 6 mana 4/8 Taunt Divine Shield lifesteal? It's so weak, like it just doesn't offer you enough. And then you're looking at like what else would you copy with Ascara, and it's like probably the next most obvious thing is Velen, the neutral card. But then if you're doing Velen in your Draenei Priest deck, you need Velen to actually come out with a big massive effect. And Shield of Ascara has no Battlecry or no Death Rattle. Ascara's is fine, but again, I'm already like clutching at straws to find something you would Ascara anyway. And then actually what's even worse is if you wanted to put Overzealous Healer in this slower base deck as a control card, Velen will copy the Death Rattle. So Velen will heal your opponent for 6 health, or 12 if you have, you know, both of them being played. And you can't Spell Burst your Velen because it doesn't copy the Spell Burst, so that's a bit of an issue. Now, I have been thinking off camera, I don't know if this works, if you combine Shadow Touch Kvaldir with Velen, if he's copied Overzealous Healer, like, you know, 5 times, you just OTK someone. I'm pretty certain that's not the way that would work, because I think on Shadow Touch Kvaldir, it says the next healing effect does damage. So I don't know if Velen would count as a single action of healing effect, or if it would count as multiple actions. I think it's going to be the latter, but I'm definitely going to be trying that on day 1. And then finally we have Mystified Tocha, which is such an ultra niche specific card, which seems to be better for a control deck, to give you like this Reno-like effect. The old Reno this is to take you back up to 30 health, but instead of 30 it takes you up to 42. And on the theory crafting I actually saw a few people pulling this off, and it's a pretty nasty effect if you can get it off on your slower deck. And then there's Gravity Lapse again, which I think is meant to be a control card to reduce the amount of aggression coming in. But it's going to be Turbo Poo, this card, because a lot of the really aggressive decks right now aren't statted asymmetrically. They're statted like a token stat line with +1/+1s added to them. So that's not going to work against mostly aggressive decks right now. The only one I can see it like being pretty annoying versus is the new Draenei Warrior deck that'll come out, because some of those cards are very statted in one way. And I think that was the intention of Gravity Lapse, was the counter specifically for this deck, but that is such a stupid card to put in your deck. It's crazy. Now, I will say, you have to be careful with zero-cost spells. Invariably, at some point, they'll break the game, but right now, Priest, I don't think can break the game with zero-cost spells. So, all in all, Holy Package, 1 star, I don't think it'll work. The Draenei Package, 1 star, I don't think it'll work. And Gravity Lapse, 1 star. I don't even think that'll get into the list of Control Priest, which, by the way, isn't even rating on HS Replay right now as a deck. So, that's not even a tier 3 deck, it's a tier 4 deck right now. Now, the final 3, I think we'll see some testing. I think Overzealous Healer is a 1-mana 3/3 minion, which potentially can be turned into an aggro tool by casting a spell. There is a deck right now that does 1-mana minions and tries to smoke the face, and that is the Pain Priest deck. So I think Overzealous Healer will get into that Pain Priest deck, which it hovers around tier 3. I'm actually not sure this is good enough to make the list, to be honest with you, so hence why I've only given it 2 stars, but it actually could be a 3-star card. I nearly gave it 3, but Pain Priest is probably still going to sit around that region. And honestly, it might even get demoted by some of the new decks and pushed into the rough. Anchorite, I think we'll see some testing, because there is this world where you just generate this massive board of overhealed minions that are just simply not... Your opponent is just not able to deal with them. Like, they just can't trade them off. And they'll get out of the range of most spells other than hard removal spells. So, it is possible that you, instead of using this Injured Hollow thing, you'll use Heartthrob instead. I think it's too many moving pieces, so I don't think it'll actually work, so I've only given it 2 stars. And finally, maybe surprisingly, I've actually put Mystified Tocha here as another 2-star card. And it's actually because I'm going to try and play this card a lot. I have a theory, I have a plan. And my plan is to try and put this into the Pain Priest deck and almost try and treat this as Infernal from Pain Warlock. Because rather than just dropping your health very quickly, like the Pain Warlock does, the Pain Priest deck sort of hits both faces equally. And eventually, because you're a priest and you can, you can heal and stuff like that, you can get yourselves out of the tumbleweeds and back up to a nice amount of health. Also, you can actually just cheat some other stuff out that makes it asymmetrical and you're actually doing more damage to your opponent than you're taking. I think that's more common what they do. How about if by turn 4, I've done on average 9 damage to both faces, or I can manipulate it in such a way, I set my health back to 42, then I don't care anymore. I can hit my own face all I want with all my pain cards, and my opponent is going to have a big sad time, so I don't think this is going to work. Like, I've ran the numbers in my head, but it's actually really hard to, like, think about the scenario of, have I taken, or both players taken 9 damage by turn 4? I think it's a feasibility that this could be a thing, so I'm going to try it. We'll see if it works. Because of the reason that I'm going to try it, and it's going to raise the stats up on this card, I'm giving it 2 stars. Alright, now let's go to a class that isn't garbage. Rogue. Rogue is the penultimate class we're going to see that has a Starship package. They have the Gravitational Displacer, which is a very powerful effect if you can launch the Starship piece. It copies the Starship that you're getting launched. The problem is it's a 5-mana 4/3, so you have to survive through 5-mana 4/3 turn, which is going to be pretty rough. Then they have a package of Build a Starship. They have Starship Schematic, which lets you discover a Starship piece from another class. Very fun, I like this card. And then they have Scrounging Shipwright that just gives you any old piece of junk from the other classes of the Starship piece, and you'll be happy with whatever they give you. And then finally, the payoff card for building Starships is Barrel Roll, which is actually a pretty big amount of damage to a minion, but it has to be an undamaged minion, so it's a bit more specific. I think this is a really fun package for Starship. I like the idea of build your own Starship. The problem is, and I kind of alluded to it with Gravitational Displacer, the Starship pieces are all understated minions for the cost. You're taking a big tempo hit every time you play one of these bad boys. And Rogue doesn't only have to do that, take the hit of playing them. They also have to take the hit of discovering them. Like, Starship Schematic is effectively a 1-mana tax on a Starship piece, which is already a bad card. Scrounging Shipwright, at least you're getting 3/2 stats on top of it, but you're getting a random one, so you might get something completely garbage that just doesn't help you whatsoever. And you have to play 5-mana 4/3. I don't think it's going to work. I've actually given all of these 2 stars. I think this is going to be a tier 4 deck. Now, I did see this archetype being used a lot in the theory crafting streams, but I'm here to tell you, the theory crafting streams, they're there to make content. They typically try and do some nerdy little combo thing and put a YouTube video up about it. that means that the meta is normally a bit slower. They also have to put cards in their decks that they might not otherwise have done, because you have to run like a minimum of 10 cards from the new set in your deck. I think when everyone puts their decks together, like makes actual decks they want to climb with, this deck is going to be so hard to play. You're just going to always be behind. And realistically, the only world where this ever goes off is against a control deck that, you know, wants to play slow and play into the late game. And then your problem is that when you launch your starship and you get all this value, all these stats, they're just going to blast your starship out of the water with, I don't know, the Ceaseless Expanse, for example, with a black hole, for example. They're just going to have tools to deal with these things. So I don't believe in this starship. It's fun, I get it, I will definitely try it, but too slow. Then we have the bee's knees of a package. It's the package I think that is going to be probably the most played on the opening day. It's going to be this and the Libram Paladin. I think it's going to see a lot of play, because Librams were popular in the past. But this deck is going to be actually nuts, I think. And we did see a little bit of it in the Theory Crafting stream. This deck could be nuts. The idea is that you play Quasar, and you turn all of your deck into 0-cost cards, because you'll play basically your entire deck being 3 or less. And Rogue is the one class in the game that could probably play their entire deck. They could make a deck of only cards less than 3 and kill your opponent with it. Which is kind of why I put Quasar with the combo pieces. Now, there are multiple ways to kill your opponents with the Quasar. I think this is going to split off into 2 decks, which is where we're going to get to in a moment. One of them will just be a ton of spells that go to the face, and you're going to be using stuff like Ethereal Oracle to help you draw more cards, and also gives you some spell damage. You'll have Eviscerate in that deck, that type of thing. I think in that deck you're going to run Lucky Comet and Space Rock Collector, in part because of Space Rock Collector is that it will discount Dubious Purchase as well, which is the Rogue's 4-mana removal and draw option. If you can get that on 3 instead, that's a pretty tasty thing to get. I also think Lucky Comet will see play in this deck. Now, I have seen some other people theory crafting this list, and they've not included it, but the idea of Lucky Commenting and Eviscerate, I think, is going to be something they can't turn down. You're just going to need that extra bit of damage. So, all in all, I think that the Quasar Rogue deck was pretty good in the theory crafting streams, but I actually think it's going to be even more nuts, because I think the optimal list of this deck is to not run 10 cards from the new set. You'll run... Honestly, you might only run Quasar and Space Rock Collector, because really the only thing you don't want to do is hit a roadblock, and the only roadblock in the deck is hitting another Quasar, which will be a 3-cost card. There are ways to mitigate it, by the way, on the list of the theory crafting thing. Normally it's to use O Manager to generate like 3 coins over the course of the game, which again is another reason why I think Lucky Comet might see play, to generate an additional coin to get over the hump for Quasar. Anyway, that's by the by. This package I think is going to be a tier 1 deck. I think Quasar, Space Rock Collector, and Lucky Comet will be 5-star cards. Now, Pressure Point and Eridar Skulker, I think we'll see play in the other means of killing your opponent, and the other means that people have like put forwards is using MC Blingtron and Beatboxer, because if you can beatbox your opponent's face with MC Blingtron, they take an additional point of damage for every damage they take to the face. It turns that into 3 mana, deal 8 damage. It does require your opponent not to have a board, but you'll probably be chunking down your opponent's board with stuff like the Fan of Knives. I think I'll put Tarslick in this deck as well to deal with opponent's boards, because you need to stay alive until you perform this combo, and that's going to be the big deal with this deck. Can you stay alive till you get the combo off? But yeah, you'll have means to clear the board with the Rogue deck, which will hopefully allow the other stuff to go to the face. The problem with this deck is there's a couple of cards that you'll probably want to run in that deck that are above 3 cost, aka MC Blingtron, so I don't think this deck is going to be as explosive. I think it's actually going to be a bit more of a slower burnout, almost more like the old Miracle Rogue decks, where you didn't necessarily get the kill in one turn. Sometimes you would just do a huge value turn, and then follow that up with another huge value turn. In that deck, I think you'll run more of the combo pieces, in which case you'll actually want more of the combo discounts. Because realistically, right now for pressure points, you don't care about reducing the cost of combo cards in your hand by 1 in general, because Quasar is going to just take them to 0 anyway, so you just don't need it. It's too much of a good thing. But in that deck, I think you'll run more combo pieces to help keep you alive, in which case Pressure Point becomes a nice way also to clear minions off the board, and take these cards down to play with MC Blingtron. The other card, by the way, that I think people have touted to put into that deck is Jump Around featuring Garona, in which case your minions will come back to your hand as 1 cost, and again, that will be the way that you go off infinite again, is you play the Pressure Points after the the bounce around, and it'll turn all those cards, hopefully, or at least the important cards, it'll turn them back into 0 cost so you can play them again. So I think there'll be some world where this deck is also viable. And actually, I think Eridar Skulker will get into that deck as well. It's just a beat stick to keep you alive in the early game. To be honest with you, I thought Eridar Skulker would make my list of the spell version, or the spell-layer version of the deck, but I ended up cutting it as like the last card because I didn't think I could quite go explosively infinite enough with it in the deck. Basically, I thought I wouldn't be able to kill my opponent if I put that in my deck, so I took it out. So I think these will be in a different deck. I think it'll be a tier 3-ish deck. I think if you don't OTK your opponent with this Quasar combo, you're probably going to lose afterwards. I don't think you can actually take additional turns, because if you run into an unfortunate Death Knight situation where they heal themselves, your OTK potential is going to be very close to 30. I don't think you could get them at 40, so there are reasons like you need to kill them as quickly as is humanly possible. There's some classes where it won't matter, but I think in particular, like some of the control ones will actually be able to survive out of it. Druid is another one where they could potentially just survive out of it by using an ENR, for example. And then Priest, Priest, they obviously have other healing means as well. And the final card I've not talked about here is Talgath, which I guess reluctantly is a combo card, but it's 1 stars. This legendary is awful. I say it's awful. The card is fine. Alright, it's fine. Undamaged enemies take double damage is effectively the effect of Tarslick, right? My problem with this card is I don't think it should be a legendary. The effect is just not... It doesn't have a grandiose about playing Talgath. You play Talgath and you get a backstab. Cool, thanks. It's just super boring. It's also unfortunate right now that it's a 4 mana card, so it's not very good for the Quasar deck because it'll come back out as a 1 mana card. There is a world where maybe you try to run Talgath in it instead of Tarslick, but to be honest with you, I think you'll just run Tarslick and not Talgath, which will get reduced to 0. And it's probably a better card. You can also put Tarslick to the face for 1 damage, which I didn't realize when I did my... And I'll admit this, when I did my reveals, I was like, you'll Tarslick Talgath. But no, you can actually Tarslick the face. I actually never knew you could push that 1 damage to the face. I thought you had to hit a minion with it. My bad. But anyway, you'll do that for 1 additional damage, and then you can use the effect of Tarslick, hopefully to clear the board. And you just won't need Talgath. So, 1 star. Then we get to Shaman. And Shaman's got some pretty interesting packages. They have the Draenei Shaman package, which is, I'm going to call it Big Spell Shaman, because realistically the aim of the game here is the Planetary Navigator into the Draenei that sets a random spell equal to its cost. You try and hit the Nebula to turn it into a 3-cost spell, and you play Nebula assuming you have the coin on 4, or you wait to 5. And playing a Nebula on 4 or 5 is probably going to break the backs of most decks, akin to getting Tsunami on 5 in Big Spell Mage. The problem with this archetype, I think, in my opinion, is that it hasn't got enough support. It's a bit like Big Spell Mage was not very good until the mini set came out, because it just simply lacked some support. There weren't quite enough ways to cheat out the big spells. And I think Shaman is the same. I think unless you hit that combo, the Cosmonaut one taking it down to 4 by turn 8 isn't really good enough anymore. It just doesn't quite gel together. I mean, at that point, I know you're saving the 5 mana on it, but you're still playing the card on 8, which means your opponent will have 8 mana answers to your solution. So I think that's just too slow. So not terrible, but a bit too slow. Then Farseer Nabundo and Triangulate. Farseer Nabundo, I think, if this was a battle cry, it would be a really strong card. But being a Death Rattle, it's just going to take a bit of time to open up the Galaxy's lens. So I don't think it's going to be I think it's going to be a good card, but not a great card. And then finally, Triangulate. It's a good spell. It's a good way to put loads of Nebulas into your deck if you can get loads of mana cheat. And I think it's going to be a popular card. It reminds me again of Gang Up. But the thing about Gang Up is, normally when you ganged up, you picked Cold Light Oracle, which was a minion that caused both players to draw. You'd play it in a mill deck. But the nice thing about that was you would draw your other Cold Light Oracles faster because your copying card was a draw card. With Triangulate, the effect is so slow that you're taking a spell from your deck and then you're putting 3 copies of it into your deck. You might not see those 3 copies ever. At the very least, though, this is the same thing as the pre-spell, whose name has just escaped me right now, the 2 mana discover a spell from your deck. So I think the card is solid. It'll probably see some play in many different decks. It even might go into the control decks, but I've edged on the side of caution. I think this will be a tier 3 deck, and I think Triangulate maybe will get tested in other places. To be fair, this might be the 4-star card from these ones, but I decided to bundle them all together. And actually, by the way, Triangulate and Nabundo, I think we'll see some play in another deck, which is the Asteroid deck with Belied Behemoth, Ultraviolet Breaker, and Meteor Storm. I made a bit of a mess up with the reveals, I think, on Shaman, because I was talking about, I don't think the Asteroid package is going to be particularly good, because you have to get so many Asteroids into your deck to kill your opponent, that it's unreasonable. And I think at one point I mentioned you could Shudder Block Belied to put more, Ultraviolet Breaker to put more Asteroids into your deck. And I was like, sure, that's good, but, you know, you're not going to reach Critical Mass of 20. The key is that you shouldn't Shudder Block the Ultraviolet Breaker. You should hit Belied instead and turn your Asteroids into 5 damage spells, which is basically old mines from Bomb Warrior. At that point, then you don't need 20 mines in your deck anymore. You probably could get away with far fewer, like 12 or something would probably kill your opponent eventually. Does more damage to any minion on the board and is more likely to kill them faster. And then, yeah, you only need 6 to kill your opponent's face, which is fairly easy to do when Meteor Storm also shuffles 5 more into your deck, and actually it's just a really solid card. Now, I will say I don't think this archetype is going to be as good as people think it is. It's kind of weird, like, you kind of want to play the Elemental deck as a tempo-ish deck, but Meteor Storm is, like, such a control-orientated card that you don't really want to build a board before it, because you'll wipe out your own board with the Meteor Storm. So I think it sits in this place where, what is its identity? And I couldn't really figure it out. The other thing I still have an issue with, and we saw this in the theory crafting stream, where people, you know, they should have blocked the Belied, then they'd use the mini to hit one of the Ultraviolet Breakers, they'd shuffle a ton of spells into the deck. By spells I mean asteroids, and then they would cycle it, and you would draw all the asteroids, and your opponent would explode. My question is, why would you not just do this with Shudder Block, Incendious, and I forgot the card again, the cycling card that shuffles your hand into your deck, and then redraws it? Why would you not just do it with that instead? And this is kind of where I hit the breaking point with this deck. I can't think of a good reason why not. The best reason I can think of is that Meteor Storm is such a good card for, like, a control deck that you could slow the game down and just put Asteroids into your deck with just the Meteor Storm. And this actually gets me towards the Triangulate and Farseer Nabundo. I think Triangulating Meteor Storms could be a legitimately good strategy if you played this as a slower control-based deck. And Farseer Nabundo, if you can get in the Galaxy's Lens of Meteor Storm, you're basically saying to your opponent, you're not playing minions this game. I'm going to deny you playing minions, which is a really awful thing to do to your opponent. So there is actually some fun things to do. Honestly, one of my things about Shaman is the barrier to entry for a Shaman deck right now is so high because Shaman is so strong right now. Anyway, I think Belied Behemoth Ultraviolet Breaker I'm giving 3 stars to. I think this is going to be a tier 3 deck, the full-on Asteroid deck. It's just going to take too long to set up, and I don't think they're going to be able to keep up with the tempos and the other decks out there. Meteor Storm, on the other hand, I've actually given 4 stars to. I think this will actually see playing Control Shaman as well. It's basically Giant Tumbleweed, but for 1 mana less and 1 less damage. But you get some more damage front-loaded down the line. And I can see a world, and actually, I can see a world where you put Triangulate and Farseer Nabundo in, like, the Highlander variant, where you just try and lock your opponent's board down with the Galaxy's Lens and Meteor Storm. And I think that is a legitimate strategy, a legitimate scary strategy. The final 2 cards, one of them is Murmur, which I will also admit, I made a bit of a boo-boo when I did this card, because I actually forgot to mention during the reveal of it that this is an aura effect, it's not a battle cry, so this doesn't last for the rest of the game. It only works while Murmur is on the field. So these combos I was talking about, I was meant to say at the end of that, but this is unrealistic because your opponent will kill Murmur, and I just completely forgot, and I pushed upload, and I was like, oh, whatever, it's fine, I'll put it in the comments. So I left a comment saying, by the way, I forgot to mention, Murmur is an aura. And that's kind of the weakness of this card. It is an aura. So you're not going to get off any combo to kill your opponent until probably around turn 9. I can think of probably 2 ways that you can realistically 3-card combo an opponent with Battle Cry minions. So yeah, you're going to need to wait till turn 9. Which again got me to the question, why would you not just play the Incendious Shaman deck where you play on 6, Shudder Block, Incendious on 7, and then you cycle on 8 for lethal. It happens 1 turn sooner. Well, the reason for doing that is, the weakness of that deck was that you had to play Shudder Block on 1 turn, Incendious on another one, and then you would kill them on the turn afterwards. It basically put a timer of 3 turns. I'm going to kill you in 3 turns, what are you going to do about it? And normally what they did about it was kill you instead, because you're making big tempo loss plays. With Murmur, you don't have to take this turns of tempo loss. You will just kill your opponent when you get the cards Murmur I mean, in the case of killing them with, that cycle deck, you're going to wait for Murmur, you're going to wait for, whatchamacallit, the fucking shuttle block, you're going to wait for Incendious, and you're going to wait for the cycle card. Actually, you'd probably need 10 mana because you'll need to play the mini as well to get the full definite I'm going to kill you turn off. But you could probably try and do this with 9 mana as well if you don't cycle your hand 3 times. You're probably not as likely to get lethal, but either way, putting that many eruptions into your deck probably will lead to lethal eventually. So that's one of the ways of doing it. And the other way is the one I mentioned in the reveals, where you're going to use Alex Straza to take them down to 15, and you will try and kill them with elementals from 15, aka Lamplighter and Scar. I actually don't think that one is that likely, because I think you're going to run this as a control deck, in which case you're not going to be able to play elementals on every single turn. So I definitely think this is going to be the Cycle Shaman deck, and I actually think it's going to be a pretty good version. I think the old version of it was pretty good, partially because you could shoot for Battlecry minions very nicely, and indeed in this version you can actually draw the 3 Battlecry cards you're going to need very efficiently. It's just Murmur that's going to be the issue to find from your deck, but I think there's a pretty good chance that Control Shaman is good enough to see play. Shaman's got a lot of good control cards. I think Meteor Storm will go into that deck. Nabundo maybe makes the list of this deck. Definitely the Giant Tumbleweed as well gets into this deck. And I think it's going to strengthen the deck. I think it's going to be a really, really solid way to kill your opponent without requiring you to go to Infinite Demons as well. Because of those reasons, I've actually given this 4 stars. I think Control Shaman will be around the tier 2 deck. So, and I think Murmur will be in that. It basically turns that deck into a combo deck. And I think Combo Shaman could actually work. The other thing that I should mention, I said it on the reveals, you could put this in the Asteroid deck as well to, like, explode your minions very quickly to get as many Asteroids into your deck as fast as possible. But I don't think the juice is worth the squeeze on that. You're just not getting a big enough mana discount. And you can't really just draw through your deck as quickly with Elemental Shaman you can do with, like, Elemental Mage, for example. So I don't see it. The final card is First Contact. 1 mana, summon 2 random 1-cost minions. I think this will see play in none of these decks. However, the deck I think it's going to see play in it, which by the way I've given it 5 stars, I think it's going to go into Evolved Shaman, which I think when the dust settles on Renethal dropping out of the game, I think that Evolved Shaman list is going to be in the tier 1 region. It's kind of where I'm seeing the cutoff right now for about a tier 1 deck. I see that as being like the bottom end of the tier 1. And then at the top end of tier 2, I think it's going to be like Hand Buff Paladin. That's kind of where my markers are right now. And I think First Contact will go into that deck, just because you could potentially First Contact into a Nostalgia and get your 2 minions evolved, plus whatever you have on the board. It's just going to give you some extra legendary minions. One of the annoying things about the Nostalgia Shaman deck was that you normally use this with the Parachuting Pirates. It was also the benefit of that deck that you could set up the Parachuting Pirates a turn earlier. But if you ever were behind in the game, it was hard to set up this Parachuting Pirate into Evolve turn, because you knew you were going to always have to wait for 1 additional turn. The First Contact comes up a little bit faster. Just drop that into your deck. It's also not an awful turn 1 play if you're just trying to play this as a bit more of a token aggressive deck. That deck I think runs Pop-Up Book right now, partially because it wants to cheat minions. Those minions can't attack. This deck is pretty aggressive. I think you'd prefer minions that could attack, so I think First Contact will get into that deck, and I think it'll be tier 1. Anyway, that'll do it for the star ratings for this video. The final one I will do Warrior, Warlock, and the neutral card, so join me later to see those. If you've enjoyed this one, leave a like, comment, subscribe. Everything helps me out, and I'll see you again next time. Bye!